Hello everybody and welcome back. So, I did promise you guys 24 videos would be coming out today, and that's a promise I'm certainly going to be keeping. And bear in mind, since this is all coming out on Friday, it still means that you guys, yes, you people out there, you'll still be able to get Chris Chan Part 68 tomorrow. So, when you think about it, it's kind of almost like 25 videos, so you lucky people. Now we move on to kind of not so much like the other major player of the Liquid Chris saga, but certainly somebody who gave Solid Chris quite a lot to whinge over, I suppose. And this will make more sense when we get to the father call. Oh, believe you me, we will be getting there. So, yes, Kacey is one of my gal pals. Nothing major at the time. She already cares for this other dude. I do not care about her as I do care about her as a friend, though. I am the sort of man who keeps his friends close to his heart and cares about them. So where are they then, Chris? Kacey Yulia Casecat Chandler, nee Devoria, real name Sienna Duckworth, was a troll who became embroiled in the conflict between her lover, Liquid Chris, who she later married, and Christian Western Chandler, Solid Chris. And Chris describes her as having a fun, caring, kind personality, since Chris believes all women consist of nothing but these attributes. Bar 1. Chris never refused or referred to her as intelligent or smart, despite her being a student of both biological and medical sciences. Well, that's not to be suspected, ladies and gentlemen, because Chris spent a lot of his time constantly criticizing Ivy O'Neill's artwork, despite the fact that even at the time she was far, far superior to Chris. If you know, you know. Chris tried to lure, I would say almost kidnap, but lure, I suppose, is one and the same, really, Kacey to his house under the false pretense that he was actually Liquid Chris, which consisted of numerous extremely poor impersonations of Liquid, which Kacey had to pretend to be fooled by. They had a long series of phone conversations before she cut ties with him due to her father's disapproval. Kacey has a rather polarizing reception amongst Christorians. On one hand, many found her high maintenance and needy attitude quite annoying, and her tactics and phrasing bordering on gaslighting. On the other hand, she seemed to genuinely care about Chris and wanted him to improve his lifestyle and be a healthier person. Now, to be honest, I agree with that, but and Kacey did bring up the fact about what would happen if Solid just continued the way he was, but I look at that as more like tough love, and tough love is the kind of thing that nobody wants, but I think they need more than they actually want. But then again, Chris wasn't particularly receptive to hearing any advice from people who clearly knew better, and frequently told Chris advice that he needed to hear, which nevertheless ended up falling on deaf ears. Regardless of the tactics she used, most of the events that caused her to eventually drop Chris are entirely blamable on his own actions. Background. And this is what Chris probably thought Kacey looked like in real life. I don't know, should I censor this? I mean, she is, like, naked, but you can't really see anything, like... I'll just censor it anyway, just so I don't get into, like, any hot water. I don't even know who this is even meant to be. Is that meant to be... That's not Carmen Electra, is it? I won't know. While the Liquid Chris scenario played out, Chris became resentful that Liquid could not only steal his identity, but that he have... I am going to read that again. While the Liquid Chris scenario played out, Chris became resentful that Liquid could not only steal his identity, but that he could have a girlfriend whilst he couldn't. So he constructed to steal her away in a series of devious phone calls in which he pretended to be Liquid. I don't understand why anyone would do that. I don't understand why Chris couldn't have just let things go the way they were, and so that Kacey could have worked out for herself. This is not a case, ladies and gentlemen, of trying to steal somebody's girl. This is a case of this girl in question, Kacey, seeing things for what they really are. But because this, of course, was not the... Because Kacey was in on this the whole time, Well, it's probably why they probably thought this was going to work, which it did. Memorably trying to seduce her by telling her he would put his you-know-what in between her breasts and explode all over her. He also planned to follow this act by licking his you-know-what off her and recycling it. Ew. Uncomfortable and vaguely homoerotic fantasies aside, Kacey pretended to be fooled by his impersonation for a long time, until she realized it was really quick for the sake of playing along with her boyfriend's trolling games. The impersonation episode was a revealing insight into Chris's mind, certainly in not only many ways he treats women, which we've covered before. Having accused Liquid of being an impersonator, he then becomes an imposter himself in a desperate attempt to seduce Liquid's girlfriend. As one would expect, Chris did an absolutely terrible impersonation of Liquid, even though he was impersonating someone impersonating himself. I know it's a very weird cycle this is, and indeed was such a deuce that not only did Kacey frequently have to correct his impersonation while pretending to be fooled by it, but Chris continued to believe she was fooled by him while she was correcting him. As if Chris couldn't get any stupider, Kacey herself often understandably forgot to pretend to be fooled by his piss-poor impersonation, and Chris still didn't suspect a thing. His, by proxy, narcissism also reared its head numerous times, and he ended up defending solid Chris's clothing, weight, and even his haircut. Okay, the clothing and the weight, understandable, but that's the first time I've ever heard of anybody really insulting Chris's, his fade. But yeah, I probably would have. I should have. I need to get my hair cut like later this week. Anyway, it's just starting to become a nuisance again. But what do you guys think? Do you think that I'm in need to get it cut anytime soon? Well, I do need a shave. That's what I need. As revealed by Chris in the video greetings to Kacey's folks, Kacey's parents are Mr. and Mrs. Devoria. Kacey was the middle child of her parents, a military couple. Her father is a retired military militiaman. Her father is retired military. Her mother works in government affairs. She has an older brother, Cale, also military, and a younger sister, Cara, who was a freshman in college. Kacey was rumored to be attending university in Washington, D.C., living nearby an apartment with male roommates. Her family lived in the suburbs of Virginia. She majored in nursing and biology. Contact with Chris. On the 3rd of August 2009, Chris sent Kacey for Kacey from Quick to prove that he is the real Chris. And if you want to know what that looks like, as unfunny as it is, oh, and by the way, the reason why this filter is on here in the first place is because Chris needed to...
Hey, Kacey.
Despite the fact that he did this entire video to prove that he was the real Chris all this time. Yeah, I'm a little bit lost, but...
It's me. I'm sorry that my computer seems to be acting up. But, sometimes this will happen, but, just give me this shout out, I promised. I love you, Kacey. You're a good girl. And the more I talk to you, the more I appreciate you very much. And there are so many things yet you have to learn about me. But it will be learned in the near future when you come. By the way, my parents will be here when you come by later. So they'll be very happy to meet you. At least my father will. He's a nicer parent nowadays, even though back in the old days he used to be such a stick in the mud. But seriously, yeah, he's a good guy. My mom's a good woman too. Be a bit of a redneck sometime, but you earn her trust. She'll be good to you. But I'll welcome you. Lovingly with open arms. I'll see you later. Hi, Kev.
So, yes, if you're like me and you just found that entire experience to be creepy, it was. And then the next day, on the 4th of August, Chris created the quick hand-drawing original to reveal his true fat lonesome self, which we have seen before, but it's basically just Chris almost giving his fingers the equivalent of carpal tunnel and him trying to draw solitude. That's the only context you need to know. Kacey claimed to have been very hurt by the fact that Chris tried to trick her into going into his house. What he was planning to do if she did show up on his door is anyone's guess. Which is the scariest side of all of this, because remember, Chris is still under the impression that Kacey had the hots for solid Chris all this time. Now we know that's not true, but Chris thought that was true. I think it's what they call in the profession dramatic irony. Like when we know something that the characters don't. In all likelihood, he expected her to actually dump her longtime boyfriend for him once he proved he's the one true and honest creator of Sonichu and Rosechu. That, or he'd put on a brown shirt and paper medallion and hope she never noticed the difference while he ate his own NAVY off of her. Kacey datelog. On a few occasions, both Kacey and Christian Epstein have mentioned a meeting which took place between them. Kacey seems to maintain that Chris was disrespectful and perverted during this meeting. An account of the meetings Kacey had with Chris was later posted. As someone put two and two together, Kacey has met Chris Chan on 2 occasions and 1 near miss. Also, just to answer any questions from the Gaitar thread, I am the one who developed an allergy rash to Chris. I'm not kidding. It keeps getting worse each time, and I actually went to get shots and have to use a cream now for erasing the scarring. It was on one side of my face, where I keep my phone, and along my left shoulder and both arms. It's not Axe. It might be his laundry soap or something on his skin. I'm thinking it's his skin because it's where his bare hands have touched me. And now onto our show. This is rushed short versions. Kim can help fill in the details. First day. Went to mall with Kim. We met, talked, and called Liquid. We planned to have Liquid not know that Kacey was there to try to be peacemaker, and he would call, find out, and be angry. Chris had given us the slip, so we called him and finally got him back to the mall. It was scary seeing him for the first time. He sweats a god-awful lot and gets tired just walking. You notice the medallion right away. He comes speeding towards us. He looks me over, RAP eyes my breasts, and tells me, I thought you'd be a little more, makes a hand motion showing a skinnier girl. But you're gorgeous. And I'm like, WTF, you think I look more what? And he says he thought I'd be skinnier, but I'm hot, etc. We go outside to take pictures. He puts his arm around me, I sob on the inside, he shows me his eyes up close. They both look hazel. They are not different coloured. So we walk to Starbucks. He draws me a picture of Sonichu. He shows me the medallion. He constantly brushes his knee against mine and tries to rub my side, back and shoulder. RAP eyes, my eyes are constant. I send Liquid a text message to call. Liquid calls. I confess where I am. And Liquid starts screaming and demanding to talk to Chris. Chris grabs the phone and starts screaming in a crowded mall. People are uncomfortable, staring, and walk away. I'll let Liquid detail the call. Liquid talks to me again and is a jerk. I cry and ask him to go to the bathroom so I can sob. Inside, we call Liquid and ask him what he told Chris. I smudge my makeup and go back out. Chris is coming towards us. I act like I'm upset and crying. Chris mentions how Liquid sucks, etc. He says he has to go. He grabs me and pulls my face into his chest, and he smells like horror. He repeats that now we are friends and he will help me out. He then smells my hair and brushes his lips against my ear. I look onto Kim with horror. She looks at me in horror. Chris bounds away without so much as a goodbye. Overview. Chris touches me. A lot. Plus, Chris is boring, goes on and on about Sonichu, and how now I'm meeting the true creator. Plus, Chris repeats about his stupid eyes. Thinks he's better than Liquid because both of Liquid's eyes are green. Plus, Chris does not approve of Liquid. Plus, Chris tried to kiss me. Plus, Chris scares everyone. I'll let you digest this, and Liquid can chime in, and I'll write up the near miss meeting and part 2. Near miss. My cousin and I went to Charlottesville to see Kim. We almost ran into Chris-chan. I saw him near the city hall with his stupid park poster. We ran away. We went in the building and we waited, but we did not see him come out. The end. Second time. Note Liquid is now gone. We met Chris at the mall again. There was horrible traffic, so I was late, and Chris left for his British comedy. I called him and begged him back. He would for Kacey. He showed up, RAPE eyes, told me I was pretty like a teacher he once had, RAPE eyes again, etc. We walked around the mall, and all of a sudden Chris calls out, "Oops, my knuckle touched your ass." There are kids around. We hush Chris to shut up. More rap eyes. He talks about how Liquid trolled us both, but now I have the real deal to help me get through this. More attempted touching and stroking of my bare arm. More boring. More Chris asking for my number. And I say I have overprotective parents who pay for it, so I have to keep my restricted number, and no. He keeps hinting to date me and how pretty I am. Kim gets distracted by a friend. Chris and I walk along without realizing. He asks me if I want to see his car. I, of course, say yes, but then realize Kim isn't there. I text her. Chris calls his father and lies and says he's in traffic and will be late going home. Chris takes me to his car. It's awful. Stickers of Pokemon and Sonichu are everywhere. There is a homemade one of his tripod site address. The bumper sticker is held by duct tape. He tries to hold my hand while we cross the street. I glare at him and break away. He asks if I want to sit in his car. I text Kim. I say no. He insists. I sit with the door open and my legs out, ready to run. He tells me the last girl in his car besides his mom was Megan. I cry. I ask to take his picture. I do. He asks to take a picture together. So I do. He tries to grope my chest and misses horribly, only grazing it. I glare at him and tell him not to do that. He insists he slipped. I say, let's go find Kim. He tries to grab my hand again and I shake it away. He needs to rest, so he sits down on a wall outside the mall. He notices my bag from Bath and Body Works and asks what I bought. He smells one of them, and he smells one of them is called P.S. I Love You, and he jokes, P.S. I'm loving you. I laugh nervously, and we find Kim. By this time, Liquid asks for me to put on the phone so he can hear everything. So I do and hide the phone. I mention Chris liked the perfume I'm wearing, so he leans in and audibly makes a sniffing sound, and I scream, "Oh, look, makeup," and run off. He asks me for my favourite colour. I say teal. He says, "How a-tealing." I die on the inside. You know, I would laugh at this point, but it should be worth noting that Chris, even by this admission, has still been on more dates than I have, even though you can't really be telling me this is one, because this sounds more like the build-up to a horror film than an actual date. Chris keeps trying to get close and get my number. He messes with my hair and Kim yells at him for touching me. He touches me 5 seconds later. Then he leaves eventually after more boring and rap eyes. In a later call, he invites me to stay the night. I say no. He says I can come over any weekend and go to his church. He doesn't know his own religion. He sucks. The end. Overview. Plus, Chris touches me too much and tries to smell me. Plus, Chris is rap eyes always. Plus, Chris is a moron. Plus, Chris wants to be a sub for Liquid. Plus, Chris sweats so much and wipes it off on his vest. He's gross. Any questions? I may remember more later. And after the first time, I couldn't stop shaking. It was weird. The Love Quest. Once Liquid Chris returned, details of the contact between Chris and Kacey began to emerge. In Chris's addressing Liquid video, he suggested that Kacey had become a close gal pal and implies that he still pines for her. Chris would later officially proclaim his love for her in the creatively titled video I Love You Kacey, where he states that Kacey and himself had been in frequent contact with each other during the period in which Liquid disappeared, which they had, except that Chris was pretending to be Liquid, and Kacey was pretending to be fooled by it. In 10/25/2009, for Kacey, Chris graduated to an official love quest in his desperate attempt to steal Kacey from her future husband. The delusion would grow further in For Chris number 2, where Chris implies that he generally thinks Kacey is leaving Liquid for him. Kacey would later state outright that she only ever considered herself as Chris as friends. However, Chris being himself, he began to think that she really was in love with him, despite literally no evidence whatsoever, and went so far as to make a video of him gloating to Liquid that he had won her heart, having decided to enter a relationship with Chris. Kacey uploaded audio of herself singing the female part of A Whole New World from Disney's Aladdin, a romantic duet from Aladdin to YouTube. The description section ambiguously sought for Chris to sing the male part in a duet with the audio. Naturally, this culminated in a video showing the true range of Chris's Sinatra-esque tones. More like tone deaf, am I right? This cemented their status as boyfriend and girl, feigning romantic interest for the amusement of thousands of people online. Friend. And now the end of Kacey. Chris and Kacey's Harlequin romance continued for a while afterward, until Chris got into an argument with Kacey's father after attempting to prove his worthiness as a man. It doesn't go well. In the process, Kacey saw how utterly messed up he was, mentally and physically, and returned to Liquid's waiting arms. Chris's chances were utterly dashed after she got a hold of his comic to her and learned that he was willing to go and shoot Liquid. Horrified, Kacey scorned Chris for his actions in a final phone call to him, never to speak to him again. Chris would later upload a video where his solemnity was clear. This abysmal depression lasted for about 1 day. And if you want to see that for yourself, well, since I've got almost nothing better to do, called Chris is Sad. And by the way, please tell me this doesn't actually feature Linkin Park on it, because, well, I suppose this was the 2000s.
Okay, see, I just let you know, because you hung up when I was trying to say it. I'm sorry for hurting you and mistreating you. There's some lies mixed with honest truth. But it's fine. If you feel that your Chris will make you happy, it's fine. Congratulations on your wedding. I wish you and Chris all happiness in the world. I'll say a prayer for you for the wedding and safe honeymoon. At least I care about you, Kacey. You mean a lot to me. For more than just a friend.
Well, I would say, to be honest, we don't really need to see any more from that, because, like I said, anything to suggest that Chris was, actually upset was counteracted by the fact that the very next day, Chris almost completely got over Kacey immediately. He was which would imply whether he was even upset in the first place. With the release of the actual final phone call between Kacey and Chris, Kacey reveals just how well she knows Chris, predicting that he would have forgotten about her before long. While Chris did release the melodramatic monologue, Quick is Sad, in a video he made the next day, Chris is smiling from ear to ear, the very next day, Kacey was righter than she could have ever known. And I suppose for what there is just a little, like, 2012 Q&A between Chris and Kacey. It's, if you want to check this out and stuff like that, because it's like, there's not too much else about this, because there's like, I don't think there's really much else to say to this, and, well, I'd say that's, to be honest, about that. Now, the only other real pieces of, like, note, I suppose, to, like, wrap this up is that, yes, Kacey and Liquid Chris did actually get married in real life. I think they're now divorced, although I'd have there's no evidence to suggest they did. And as I've mentioned before, when it comes to, like, the women in Chris's life, even those that are trolling, it's kind of interesting to know exactly how Chris, like, will go from troll to troll or sweetheart to sweetheart, to just say what has been said already. That Chris pretty much, like, Chris never thought to improve himself in any way whatsoever, and Chris was still under the impression that he was far more important than he actually was. Hence why I kept referring to Chris in instances like this as Chris Epstein, because, well, he was also somebody who thought he was all that when he wasn't. But with all that being said and done, that's it. That's the entirety of Kacey. Now, with that being said, it's not the last time we'll be talking about Kacey, because I do want to cover the father phone call, as well as the call between Kacey, Chris, and Liquid Chris. And finally, the last phone call between Kacey and Chris Chan, because you'll be surprised to see, like, I kind of wanted to almost call it, like, Chris and Remorse or something like that. We'll play it by ear when we get to it. But with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys enjoyed this article on Kacey Devoria, and I can't wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. So take care, and bye-bye for now.